pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Adequate notice of the meetings to be held by the Township of Ocean Board of Education on Tuesday, April 27th, 2021 at 7 p.m. has been provided in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 231, Public Laws 1975. Notice of the meeting was posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of the Administration Building, 163 Monmouth Road, Oakhurst, New Jersey, all Ocean Township District Schools and Transportation, and the school district website on January 8th, 2021. Notice of the meeting was transmitted to the Asbury Park Press and the New Coaster newspapers on January 8th, 2021. Notice of the meeting was filed with the municipal clerk, Township of Ocean, on January 8th, 2021. Mr. General, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Mrs. Beal,
Here.
Mrs. Gilman,
Here.
Ms. Hayes,
Here.
Mrs. McGovern,
Here.
Mrs. Forlamas,
Here.
Mrs. Tallarico.
Here.
Mr. Torello,
Here.
Mr. Weinstein,
Here.
and Mrs. Fuller.
Present.
We have 9 members present. We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Downerone. Welcome, everyone, to our budget hearing. We thank you for joining us here tonight. As you've seen, if you've looked at the agenda, the focus of our meeting tonight is on the budget. We'll be getting a presentation from Mr. Downerone in just a few moments detailing the budget that we are voting on this evening. I think we're really pleased as a board and are thankful to Mr. Downerone and the administration and all of the work that was done by Ms. Carey and others to get us to where we are today. We'll be going through some updated budget numbers that thankfully we were able to reduce the levy on the taxpayers from where we were back in March for our tentative budget. So we're really thankful that we were able to do that. We don't take this responsibility lightly. We recognize that it is an impact on the residents of Ocean Township, the taxpayers of Ocean Township. And we work very hard to both balance the impact financially to the residents while making sure that we continue to provide the best education to the students of the township. We're lucky that despite the reduction in state aid that we have experienced over the past number of years and will continue to experience for a number of years going forward, there's some federal money coming to offset that loss a little bit this year, and hopefully going into next year, we can do some more good things with those funds that are coming. So at this time, we're going to move on to Mr. Downerone for the presentation of the proposed 2021-2022 school budget.
And I think Dr. Stefankiewicz was going to
I'm sorry,
get it
Dr.
going.
Stefankiewicz, you may go first.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
We're Ken and I tag
moving
team
along.
this. For those of you who've seen this presentation for many years now, you know that it's a tag team effort. So,
And I'm sharing my screen.
okay. Ken takes all the non-exciting slides, and I tend to take more of the exciting slides. So that's how we break it up.
That's the balance.
That's how we break it up.
I thought it was odd and even.
Well, it could be that too. Ken is always the odd, but that's a different story altogether.
I've been called worse.
You've been called worse, absolutely. All right, so welcome everyone. Great to see everyone, sort of. And what we'd like to do as part of this presentation is really talk about how the budget's formulated, what goes into it. What's the background? Ken will discuss the financial side of things, the revenues, the expenditures, all those fun things. Talk about what this budget funds in terms of educational initiatives, which is part of the vision of the district, and then what it means for the taxpayer as it relates to how it relates to you and me as taxpayers in Ocean Township. So, starting with the first slide, as you can see, when we formulate our budget, we really follow the philosophy put forth as part of our district strategic plan. When we went through the strategic plan, obviously we talk about student success, we talk about finances, we talk about facilities, we talk about climate and culture and all those things. And when we build a budget, it's with all of those goals in mind. So as we mentioned, I think at a previous meeting, we are actually coming up next year on the last year of our strategic plan. So we should be revisiting that next year. But all of these budget items are related to our strategic plan in some capacity. So that's something that's very important to remember. You can go to the next slide, Marianne. And you want to take that one? I was ready to take it.
I'm moving the slide, so.
Oh, you're
don't
okay,
have to yell at
Ken.
Mary
Okay,
Ann.
go to,
You
okay,
can
I
yell.
won't say Mary Ann, you got it, Kenny.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously this year, this past year, a year of, it's cliche at this point, but obviously a year like no other. And, the pandemic has really had significant impacts on the budget because obviously we've had to spend a lot of money on things that we didn't necessarily know we were going to have to spend money on. We've also saved money in some areas because of different, particularly at the end of last year when we were not in session. And as Ms. Fuller said, that, we have been losing state aid each year for the past several years. This year, upwards of around $600,000. But we have been able to get federal funding that has helped to offset that. The first round was really last year, the CARES Act money that we received around $362,000, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there. That was spent probably a year ago, right? Used for a lot of PPE, a lot of upgrades to facilities, a lot of the things we were going to need to open up schools come September. And that allocation went pretty quick. At the end of December, the federal government passed the ESSER II Act, which allocated more money, approximately $1.5 million to us. And so some of that you will see allocated in this budget tonight. And we are still working on the remainder of that allocation, and that application is due to the state by May 14th, and we're working on that. And then, of course, the latest of the federal funding is the ESSER III, or what we're calling ESSER III. And at this point, while we have no firm figures, it's been estimated that we anticipate getting approximately a little over $4 million in that. So that will help us significantly, but it's hard to really know what that is because we haven't gotten that allocation yet. What we know is our ESSER I, which has been received and spent, and ESSER II, which we have the allocation, but it's just the application process we have to go through. We've also received from reimbursements from FEMA for a variety of different COVID-related expenses. And then, there's always in any budget year, decreases and increases, things that we wound up paying more for that we didn't anticipate, things that we wound up paying less for that we anticipated. For example, last year, in the last couple of years, we haven't had a lot of snow. So we saved on snow removal. We saved on some of the overtime related to that. So, these are all things that in a given year, there's the ebb and flow of how the budget, goes in a given year. So Ken, would you like to go to the next, or do you have something to add to that?
I'd like to add just.
Oh, by all
quickly,
means, go right ahead.
As far as the timelines go, of course, tonight is the local budget portion of our spending plan for next year. And the odd thing is that the spending plan is going to be in pieces, and it also will span more than 1 year because of the federal monies. So tonight is a decision on the local portion. Okay, by May 14th, as Dr. Stefankiewicz said, we have to decide on, and so that brings us to our May 11th meeting where the board will have to talk more about the allocation of that first, or actually the second round of ESSER funds, the federal funds. And then hopefully by then we will know the third round as to how much. And the key is really the uses, the allowable uses of these funds. So we know that for the funds that we've received so far or have been allocated so far, but we do not know that possible 4 million. We're not even sure the number, let alone the allowable uses of those funds. So all that is important in timing as we go forward and as we talk about more budget. This presentation is more specific to the local budget, but there are some pieces, and we'll note them, that will carry to the federal funds. Okay. Now I believe it's my turn. Okay, revenues. We're going to go through the budget revenue side quickly, and as promised by popular demand, just a one slide, a 101, a state aid 101. What is state aid? I think it was Ms. Tallarico who asked about it, so I was happy to add a slide for state aid, and we can have a more advanced workshop or agenda item in the future. But so far, I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible, even though it's something that's not simple, but we'll give it a shot. So what is state aid? School Funding Reform Act 2008, SAFRA, you may hear it referred to. Really two basic portions of state aid. One is the categorical aid, and that's based on pure numbers of students. There's some weights to it. Again, it's formula based within that category, but each category has a formula and has an allocation, and you can see the allocations on the slide, and the categories, so special education, transportation, and security aid. There have been other categories that have come and gone. There's been park readiness. There's been other things that have, over the years, have come and gone. But this categorical aid is basically like our security aid is $83 a student. That's pretty straightforward. And there's some different weights sometimes for at-risk students or special needs students or LEP students, limited English students. So sometimes there are different weights to the per pupil amounts, but in general, the per pupil amount is what drives the categorical aid. And it's important to note that special education kind of spans both of these categories. So as you see, 1/3 of our special education aid is given to us through the categorical aid category. And the other 2/3 will be under the need-based aid. So let's go to number 2, equalization aid. This is the need-based. This is the basic formula aid based on need for the district. Okay, the two components of this formula aid, need-based, is they utilize an adequacy budget, and they compare that to the local fair share or local share calculation. So in essence, on the adequacy budget, they use a formula. It's a model of what the state says a district our size, a district our number of students. Again, they use weighted enrollment, and they plug it into a formula, and they say, this is what you would need to have an adequate budget, a minimum amount that you to have an adequate budget. Then they compare that to the local share calculation. So they say, okay, this is what your budget, the minimum budget could be, and this is how much your district can afford. So the local share calculation, the two major parts of that are the township property valuation and income levels. So they actually use, and there's a lag in all of this information, but they use tax returns and of course property values, commercial home, everything in the town. So if they determine that you can afford to pay an adequate budget, then you do not receive state aid. And that's what has been determined for Ocean Township. Okay, so it goes through a formula. Again, we could go through each part of this at a future time, but right now that's really the basics. And you see the, so in 2008, see that $2,620,979, that's the amount that as of 2017 and through, we've talked about the S2 legislation. So when they run this formula, that's the amount of equalization aid, in which they now call adjustment aid, that we're slated to lose because the town can afford, based on our adequacy budget, the town can afford to pay, to not receive that in aid, is what they're saying. Okay, so that 2.6 million, you'll hear it again as we continue to go through this, but I hope that did more to help than it did to hurt as far as confusion goes. But those are the basics. two pieces, categorical and need-based. And the need-based is where we lose monies, and we'll be losing money in the future. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. But let's look back quickly. So since 2017-18, we have been losing money, as we said, and you see the exact amounts. And Ms. Fuller alluded to it. The loss for next year will be $681,055. And again, this is all based on that need-based formula in which the state determines how much aid we qualify for. So since 17-18, for as of next year, as of the 21-22 budget, we'll be losing the 1.689357 in aid. So the next is the state aid. You can see it in a bar graph, and this actually goes a little bit further back. This goes back to 9-10, where you can see we were almost at $10 million in state aid. And then you can see the last one where with that $681,000 loss, we'll be down to just over $6 million in state aid. All right, what does that mean as far in relation to the rest of our revenues? So this chart, this pie chart shows not only the state aid, and you see that as for the 21-22 year, that's 7.78%. It also shows, of course, our other pieces of the revenue that support the budget. And you can see that our fees and rentals and things that we'll talk about later, but that we try to find as far as alternative revenues and donations and grants and things like that. Unfortunately, that's still a small piece of the pie, less than 1%. And of course, as we said, state aid is the second largest piece. And actually, our fund balance is a little bit larger, and Dr. Stefankiewicz alluded to it, and that helps to support the budget. But we were able to, with some of the savings we had last year, that has helped in this year's budget, and that's that 4.77%. And of course, the biggest piece of the pie is the tax levy, which is supported by the taxpayers, all the valuation throughout the town, businesses and homes and so forth. Okay, so that gives you a good idea of what makes up the revenues, and now where are we going in the future? Back to the state aid portion of the revenues. As we said, the $681,000 is for 21-22, and these projections will vary. They have varied, and they will continue to vary based on our enrollments and the variables in the formula. So for the next 3 years, you see what we're slated to lose there, totaling another $931,000. And then you see in the bottom of the slide where we're getting back to that $2.6 million number as far as loss in state aid that we started with when we were talking about the formula, the need-based formula. So that is the future of our state aid, a loss of 2.6 million out to 24-25. Now, and we've talked about this a couple of times in our past meetings, and it's important to note the difference, because we are getting some one-time 1 year or even 2 year federal monies, which is great, and it's really going to help us this year and next year. But we just have to be wary, and we have to have an eye towards the future financially in planning as we look further down past this infusion of federal monies because of the pandemic, and we calculate and we keep looking at what we're losing in state aid, and we have to be prepared for that. So and that's something we've been talking about and we'll continue to talk about, and we're continuing to do. But this chart really illustrates that when you lose the 2.6 million, and you see in the almost the bottom right corner, the $2.6 million, but as you lose it year to year, the money you lost last year, even though you're in a new year, you think, oh, well, we lost that last year, but you're really losing it again in the next year because it's cumulative, right? So when you lose in 1 year, you're also losing that next year. Now we may lose more, so that's on top of that. And that's exactly what this chart is showing with the years at the top and then down the side as to each year what we've lost since 17-18. And once that's lost, it's continued to be lost. And the additional loss on top of the previous loss, which totals to 2.6 million. And then you see the cumulative loss of over $11 million. So that's just something to think about as we, continue through this. Okay, now where are we going to be? Ooh. Did I pass? Almost passed that. Okay, we're back to our pie chart, and we'll see this is in 24-25, an estimate as to where we'll be. We see that their state aid will be down to about 6.5%, and the tax levy will be up to almost 90% in 24-25 after we calculate the additional loss of state aid. All right, now we're gonna get into this year, the 21-22, in where we are on the revenue side. I need to take a minute to talk about the tax levy cap, because that biggest piece of the pie, right, where we've talked about what the state says is that you are restricted on how much that piece of the pie on the revenue side can grow, okay? So how much can we tax the taxpayers is limited by the state. So how they limit it, they set a 2% cap. So they say you cannot grow what you tax the taxpayers by more than 2%. However, they give conditions in which they will authorize us to go to the taxpayer for more money. So the state isn't giving us the money, right? It's just allowing us to ask the taxpayer for more money. So and there's certain conditions in which we can go over the 2%. And we can do that if within certain enrollment increases in which we know we do not have. And for health benefit expenses in which this year we do not have any enough to qualify for a cap waiver. So those are the two major items that in the past or in the future that we can qualify for a cap waiver. Now the third bullet there is banked cap. So what the state also says is that if the district in any one year has a cap waiver where they're allowed to go over 2%, but they do not, or they choose to go below the 2%, they're saying you're not going to lose that authority to exceed the 2%. What they'll do is they'll bank it. They'll allow you for 3 years to say, okay, we are allowed to go over 2%, or we went under 2%, but in the next year, something happens in which we needed to now use that spending authority from the prior year, you're allowed to. So if we go below 2% this year, and then next year something happens where we want to exceed the 2%, we're allowed to use that banked cap from the prior year. So it doesn't go away. That spending authority where they allow us to increase the taxes more than the 2% cap will stay with us for 3 years before it goes away. And it's important to note that if we do not have that, and the slide shows that we have over $1.1 million in available banked cap now to use. Excuse me. But if we did not have that waiver or that banked cap, we would have, the board wanted to go over the 2%, we would have to go to vote to the residents of Ocean. So we would actually, in November, if we wanted to go up to 3%, we would have to have a ballot question and the authority and ask them through a ballot question to increase our budget by 1%, right? The 2% is allowed, and that 1% that's not allowed, because if we didn't have any bank cap or waivers, then we would have to go to the residents and ask them, would you allow a 1% additional increase to the budget? So that's something, we have not done in the past. And I'll show you some of the history here of our school budget tax levy increases. So you can see we have been either, at the 2% or below for all but 1 year, which was a bad year, 18-19. We had a very large health benefit increase. The state health benefits went up over 13.5%. And that in and of itself being one of the benefits being one of the largest line items in the budget, that pushed us over the cap amount just by itself without taking into account any increases in any other expenses. So, and that's where we did, go over, and we were allowed to, because of the health benefits increases, we are allowed to the waiver to go over the cap. So that's where we went to the 2.46% you see there. Okay, so where are we this year? So this year, through the budget process, as we've been discussing for some time now, we, as Ms. Fuller said, we were in the tentative budget in March, on March 23rd. We did approve the 2% increase, the $1.3 million tax levy increase to submit to the county. At that time, that's the deadline to submit a tentative budget to the Department of Education, the county office, for their review. So we did vote on this, and it was approved by the board, knowing that, we would have a little more time, as we say, with the different federal monies and different pieces of federal monies coming in, to give us a little more time to evaluate what kind of monies we'll be receiving. So it was approved by the county. And now, after our review administratively, continuing to look at it, and with the allocation really on that second piece, that ESSER 2 funds, the Dr. Svankwitz discussed over approximately $1.5 million. We feel that we can reduce the tax levy, the local portion, to the 1.7% and still be able to achieve everything that the board has discussed in the budget, the needs, and we'll go over some of those specifics in a few more slides. But we believe that we can achieve everything that we discussed through the budget process and all the initiatives that were discussed, and keep the tax levy below the 2% at the 1.7% increase. And you see the related tax impact to homeowners. And again, that's a very rough estimate. Okay, that's the revenue side. Expenses. Now this is much shorter, so don't worry. And it's important to note on the expense side, as we always talk about, the first two rows of this chart, where you look to the last column and you see 60.25% and 21.44%. Salaries and benefits make up the lion's share of our the school budget, and really of any school budget. It's a labor-intensive industry. We know that, and so that's a big portion of the budget when you look at the percentages. And this compares our current year budget to the proposed budget. And this is if you look at the bottom, and you see that the percentages, the 1.09 does not match up to the 1.7%, right, of the tax levy. But remember, the tax levy is one piece of the revenue. So that's why that's higher. And with the state aid loss, even though we're increasing the tax levy piece of the revenue of 1.7%, we're only able to increase our appropriations just over 1% because we lost other pieces of our revenue in state aid. I know we've kind of gone through this before, but I know it takes some refreshing sometimes, and even for me, just to keep looking at it and really understand that the piece of the revenue, the tax levy, is what's capped. It's really not what we can spend. It's what we can tax the taxpayer is where the cap is. So theoretically, if our state aid if we doubled our state aid, we could keep the tax levy at 2% or 1.7%, and our expenses, we could go up more than 2%. We could go up higher because we have additional revenue that's being infused into the budget that's not being capped. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, the next slide is really the same categories, just in a chart. So let's get through that. Okay, so what do we do to try to save and control some of the expenses in the budget? So, and I know we talk about some of these things all the time, but it's certainly well worth just quickly going over some of them again. Cooperative purchasing is something we always strive to do, and you see that in board approvals every month, whether it's, I think last month we approved our ACES cooperative contract where you have about 350 other districts that cooperatively purchase rates as far as electrical rates go. So our utilities are a big one. Just supplies, the day-to-day teaching supplies, all different types of supplies, office supplies. We cooperatively purchase, all of our supplies. Insurance is another large one. All of our workers' comp insurance, or our property insurance, or auto insurance, all of that goes through a JIF, a joint insurance fund, and where again we try to leverage other districts and purchasing power, basically, where we can achieve better rates and lower rates by joining with other districts. And it doesn't stop with other districts. Really, municipality, we've enjoyed a very good relationship with them up till now regarding many arrangements with the township. We actually clean some of our custodial staff members, clean the courtroom, the town hall, and then their DPW cuts the elementary school grass and lawn care at each of the elementary schools. They pick up our garbage, recycling. So we have some agreements that busing. We provide the busing for their summer camps. So we've done well with both of us, and that's important because if they save money and we save money, it's really double save for the taxpayer, of course, because you're paying municipal taxes and you're paying school taxes. So if we can prevent, paying someone else to do something that the town can do, then they get some revenue from us and we save expenses, and both of those things help the taxpayer on both sides of their pocket. So that's a good thing, and we try to do that as much as we can. And then other local school districts, we utilize our bus mechanics with Long Branch. We have a joint ice hockey team with Shore Regional and Monmouth Regional. Deal School, we are cafeteria, Sodexo, our cafeteria services. We utilize those services, and we provide that service to Deal School for a fee. Again, we recoup some revenue for us that helps, back to that about 1% or less, just less than 1% of that piece of the pie in the revenue. But every 1% certainly helps. Okay, and speaking of that, alternative revenue sources, grants and donations have recently, I think we've done well in some areas. So the intermediate school playground is one of them, where we have both a grant that we received from the AAD, the dermatologist, or $8,000 grant for shade structure as part of the playground, and then also donations from our WJ Foundation, over $100,000, Camp David $20,000. So that playground was more than half funded by donations and grants and less by the taxpayers. So that was a great thing. Special Olympics is another new thing that's exciting. It's a great program for kids, and it's over $13,000 a year. So that was another great get, I thought, this year. And you'll see some other ones listed on the slides. So facility rentals, other things that now, Dr. Frankowitz mentioned some of the savings and some of the expenses that we've had through the pandemic. We're from PPE to savings, and loss of revenue is another thing that's happened. And as we know, we've talked about facility rentals. This is another thing that goes into that equation of savings versus expenses and loss of revenue. So we did lose revenue, of course, last summer, and we have not had the same level of facility rentals this year. And really going into next year, that's another uncertainty as to how much daily rentals we will have. We do plan on having the summer camps, which is a large part of that, but how much we'll have during the year is another question mark. Sponsorship, this is something, we have a sponsorship program in the district that it's been down the last year and a half or 2 years, of course, but we used to recoup about $30,000 in sponsorships where local businesses would advertise, and we would put their all of their information on different playbills and different school publications in exchange for donations. So, and that was a structured program, and we're still continuing with that. And we've had some other things that we've tried, like school bus advertising. We went good for a year and then down. Right? As of now, we do not have any, but that's been something that's been up and down. But like I said, we've tried to do whatever we can to relieve as much as we can, which isn't much, any pressure on the taxpayers, because a dollar that we can save, donations or sponsorships, is a dollar less that goes to that biggest piece of the pie, the tax levy. And then lastly, solar is something that we've done in the past, and we have over, and I'll show you some pictures. You can see this is an aerial of the intermediate school, and you can see those little checkered parts on the top of the building. Those are all solar arrays. That's 250 kW on the intermediate school, and then we also have 135 kW on the high school. So that helps us in two ways. It reduces our electric consumption, and then we can also sell back some of that in solar credits. So we've been doing that for about 8 years now, 7 or 8 years. And as the board knows, we are investigating a PPA agreement, and within the next couple of weeks, in May sometime, we hope to have the Spiesel architects back to discuss that, that possible bid and what that will look like. We do have some roof repairs that will need to be done. So that's something that we at least hope that the roof repairs can be funded by the solar arrays. So that's something that's more to come, but that's something that has been very helpful to our budget to help reduce our operating budget as far as electrical consumption goes. And this is just a close-up of the panels on the roof of the high school. And then, well, that's it for now for me. So I want to kick it back to Dr. Stefankiewicz.
Thank you, Mr. Janarone. Excellent job. And, I think it naturally leads to the question that why do we do all the things that Mr. Janarone spoke about, right? Why do we do all that? It's for the next part, which is to educate our children, to provide them with the best possible education that we can provide. So starting off, we just wanted to sort of just remind everyone and just reemphasize some of the things we have as a district have been able to accomplish over the last several years. Last school year, if you recall, at the beginning of last school year, we were through Mr. O'Neill and his initiatives, working with our principals and each school team, were able to achieve bronze recognition as part of the Future Ready Schools process, which was a wonderful recognition for all of our schools. Several years ago, we went through the state monitoring program, which is known as CUSAC, and we're evaluated in 5 different areas that you see there on the screen. And through that process, which is rather rigorous, very rigorous, we were able to be designated as a high-performing school district by the Department of Education. We are very excited to inform you all that we'll be going through that process again next year. So we're very excited about that.
Right.
Always a pleasure to welcome the state and county to our district. This next one is hot off the presses, and as you know, over the years, I'm not a huge fan of the rankings. You know, the different magazine rankings. They all have different, you know, the criteria and what have you. But when we get in there, hey, let's use it for what we can use it for. So hot off the presses, literally out today, U.S. News and World Report 2021 Best High Schools. And while the designation is within the top 40, our high school actually ranked in the top 25% of all of the nearly 18,000 high schools that were ranked nationwide. So I think that's a very nice thing. Once again, I don't get too high for good rankings. I don't get too low for when the rankings aren't as good. But, you know, it's certainly nice to mention. It's a testament to the hard work of the folks, Ms. Kasuba and everyone at the high school. And I always say, when our high school gets good recognition, that is also a product of the middle school and all of the elementary schools, because they all feed to the high school. So it really is you know, it's a compliment to all of our staff members and all of our programs and all of our kids. So it's a nice thing. All right. So, you know, going over some of the initiatives that we have put forth in the last several years, probably, I mean, we've had a lot of big ones. Last week, we had a wonderful presentation on our Spartan schools, and I think we know the impact that our Spartan schools have had on our schools over the last 5 years. But I think, you know, something that we brought in a couple of years ago that we were able to get funding for, that will be the gift that keeps on giving year after year after year, that will help close the opportunity gaps for our students that exist within our district. It will level the playing field. Was our preschool initiative and our goal towards universal pre-K. You know, if you add next year's funding into the mix, which is $2.156 million, will be funded just over $4.1 million over the last really 2 years. Because in the one, you know, we had the 1 year and then this year and then, well, actually, yeah, 3 years. That funds a lucky 13 full day classes in district and then 2 additional classes at our partners, Acelero. It's really been a terrific, like I said, it levels the playing field for our kids. It helps to get a lot of kids into preschool that perhaps wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we look forward to that continuing to grow. If you go to the next slide, Ken. So some of the things that we've talked about, some of the things we've done, and then things that are being funded in this year's budget. You can see we talked about the preschool initiative, talked about Future Ready. In this year's budget, we had a presentation several weeks ago on the new elementary social studies program that we'll be looking to fund in this year's budget. New electives that we've brought in over the years, but also new electives that we're funding at TOIS. That's been a very big part of our strategic plan. We mentioned the Spartan Schools. Along with Spartan Schools is the Computer Science Initiative, for which we received a statewide grant a few years ago. We brought in educational technology specialists. And we look forward to them actually going back to be able to do that job sometime in the near future, rather than teaching classes, as many of them have this year. Our BCBA in the area of working with our special needs population, also our behaviorist, which is things we've added, and will be, at least as far as a BCBA, looking to add another BCBA for next year, and we'll get to that when we get to personnel. Academic coaches we've brought in, interventionists we've brought in, our own student assistance counselors, our diversity initiatives, and staff professional development. These are all major initiatives that we have been really transforming over the last 3-4 years how we deliver education in this district. You know, very early on, I remember when when I got here 7 years ago, is right when Park was coming out, right? And there was so much discussion about teaching to the test and not putting so much emphasis on test scores. And we heard that, and we have been, I don't want to say moving away from an importance of test scores, but we teach kids the way we know teaching and learning should work, through hands-on activities, through engagement, through active student engagement, which doesn't always line up with standardized testing. Sometimes, you know, now that being said, if you're doing everything well, you should do well in standardized testing, and we should do better in standardized testing. The Park has not been something, and then the NJSLA has not been something that we've really had tremendous success with. But as I've said many times, that those tests are not a barometer or an indicator of the truly great things that are going on every day in our schools. And I think hopefully you see that when we do the presentations that we do. So many wonderful initiatives taking place. You see some pictures, and we just, you know, included some pictures of the Spartan schools, business and finance. You move on to our technology, visual performing arts. Some of the, we've developed our Spartan Innovation Nights, which unfortunately, you know, a lot of the things we talk about, we've had to put on hold this year, you know, because of the pandemic, of course, but our Spartan Innovation Nights that we've had for our K-8 students, and of course, our Academic Family Fun Nights, which go on at our through K-5, have just been wonderful experiences and wonderful additions to what we do here as a district. Next thing we want to talk about is some of the personnel additions that are in this budget for next year. So as I mentioned, we already have a BCBA for the elementary level. We'll be looking to add another BCBA for the secondary level. We have a couple of special education teaching additions for the high school, also for the pre-K, and also for OTES. We put instructional assistants because every year we add instructional assistants, so we always add instructional assistants. We will be looking to add some advisor stipends at both the high school and the intermediate school, as recommended by the principals. As we've mentioned before also, we are taking some of our part-time basic skills teachers and elevating them to full-time interventionist positions at the elementary level. So that will be happening as part of this budget. Adding to our current summer programs, very important, our Skills for Success program, our Summer Bridge programs, our counselors, our mental health supports, all being increased this summer, partly from the budget and also partly from our grant funding, particularly with allocations to those particular areas of learning acceleration and mental health supports. And then, of course, something we've talked a lot about too is our equity coach position, which we're very excited about bringing that individual in who will help us, really address, a lot of equity and diversity needs within our district. So all funded within this budget, including some of the grant funding from the federal government as part of that. Okay. Capital upgrades. Kenneth, you want to take that back over?
Sure. The first bullet we've talked about a little bit. This is the architectural group that's coming back to us with the report as far as panels and roof repairs that we can add to our existing panels that we have on 2 schools, and looking to add them on the other schools, and even enhancing what we have on the high school and intermediate school. So that's to come. Parking lot upgrades, high school, mill and pave some of the bad areas, and then Wayside, an expansion of that area that's been a long time coming. So we're going to try to help ease some of the traffic concerns over at the Wayside Elementary School. Some ADA upgrades for this building, such as a bathroom and a chairlift. And then we have our school buses that, as we know, there's a lifespan of 15 years on school buses. And once the manufacture date is 15 years, we have to retire them. And that's one of our alternative revenue sources where we'll go to GovDeals is the online auction site that we utilize. And we sell buses or old technology or really anything that we no longer use in the district. We'll put it on the surplus site, and you'll be amazed as to what you can get for some of the things that are no longer used. I think our old sewing machines from the intermediate school were one of my favorites that we are able to sell for $20,000+. I couldn't believe it, but that just sticks in my head always. School bus is okay. Then there's some renovations in classrooms and offices in the high school and intermediate school. We have some continue some of our asbestos abatement that it's encapsulated. It's just something we're trying to do every year to eventually be asbestos free. So we're continue to work on that during the summer. And then selected sidewalk repair. We know from past lawsuits that upkeeping our facilities is cheaper in the long run than paying the attorney when there's a slip and fall. So, and then the final one is some of our technology upgrades and initiatives, and really continuing a lot of the early initiatives, in which with a major emphasis on the infrastructure. And as we know, our technology is more important than ever, and the wireless infrastructure is something that we're looking to upgrade and replace. So that's a large budget item. And then, of course, our continued maintenance and replacement for Chromebooks and grades 4, 5, and 9. And then we have some switches and replacements in some of the schools you see there to also really get our infrastructure up to snuff as the technology changes every year. But it's something we rely on more and more. And when you don't have it, it's not easy when you don't have it anymore. So that's what we're trying to accomplish there.
Okay, and then
You.
just last thing is that we talk about obviously is all of the various ways we provide communications electronically, but I think we'd be remiss to not mention that, you know, in this school year, which we will continue into next, was the addition of our communication officer, Fran Burke, that we added, who we were able to add mid-year. And I think hopefully you've all been able to see a lot of the fruits of that labor. Fran's been very good at getting press releases out and getting great coverage in a lot of the local press. And certainly we send these things out through these electronic means as well. A story going out today, I think, about our playground. So lots of things going on, and Fran's done a nice job. I think we're only beginning, you know, we're starting to scratch the surface there, and we'll continue to build that as time goes on and in post-pandemic world that we'll be in. But you know, that's been a wonderful addition, I think, to the district in terms of communication. So with that, I think the presentation is complete, and we're happy to answer any questions from the board.
Can before we
do that,
I just want to, because I neglected to do it earlier, but I wanted to thank Shannon. And I don't know if I just stopped sharing. So
She's here.
Shannon,
There she is.
Wave, Shannon, or say something so you pop up
I can
to the
unmute her
front.
if you want.
Yeah,
There she is.
Shannon does a lot of work on the details of this budget, and I meant to mention her in the beginning, even though I wrote it down. I forgot. I'm sorry, Shannon, but thank you for all of your work on this budget. And so I just wanted to make sure that, and I know the board knows, but she's done an excellent job so far. So with some big shoes to fill. So it's everything's going great.
Yes, thank you, Shannon.
and we all know it's not easy working for Mr. General. So
That's not true.
Oh, I was going to say she just laughed.
oh, she knows it's true. She just doesn't want to say it.
That's a little too much. Okay, so any questions from the board? And and then we can
My
go to
only
the public.
question is, on the superintendent budget message, I assume that's gonna go out with the new numbers, or that already went out, but you're.
No,
gonna
that
do it
was,
updated?
right, that was already out, so I will, once, if the board vote is with the 1.7, then I would have to adjust
We'll change the numbers.
those numbers and put them on, on the website and repost everything to the website. Because of the way it goes, the initial tentative budget that was approved at the 2%,
Right.
that's what goes to the county, that's what they approve, and then that's what I have to advertise, that's what goes to the public. And then really you're making the change that administratively we're proposing to bring it down $200,000, which is to the 1.7%. And then if that's approved tonight, then I will change everything on the website. So when anyone has questions or looks at the website about budget information, it's the up-to-date numbers. And of course, we have to resubmit to the county also for their approval at the lower, with any changes that are made at the public hearing tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work and for all the administrators I know, and I mean, the principals, everybody that put some time and effort into this, along with the board. Thank you, everybody.
And I do appreciate the fact that your office worked very hard, and I know Jim's did as well, to bring that number down. I very much appreciate that. That was very important to me. So thank you very much.
Well, we live here too. So
Yeah.
certainly seen quite an increase in my property taxes in the last couple of years. So I don't mind that, keeping it as low as we possibly can.
Tough year.
Yeah.
It's a balance, of course.
Well, the last couple of years with Lock Arbor loss, with the loss of state aid, it's been very difficult. So.
Ms. Gilman?
I just was going to follow up with Denise and say how important it is to the community, especially this year. I think they'll appreciate seeing a drop in something.
Well,
that has to
I mean, it's
do
not a
with-
drop.
Yeah, it's a drop in the
Not as much
increase.
as it could have
We've
been.
lowered the
Right.
increase is what we've
Right,
done.
right.
So just,
And then there's more discussion to come with the federal money. So we'll, more to come.
Just with that, I think that I feel good that we were listening to what is kind of going on in the world around us, around special ed and all the technology things we need to do to kind of keep us current and also listen to what's going on. So I think the budget has a nice balance of that, which I appreciate. So thanks.
Ms. Hayes?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much for this presentation. I don't do numbers very well, so thank you for taking my side questions over the last few weeks. And you explain it very well, Mr. General. Thank you. The 1.5 estimated million from ESSER 2, do we have yet almost like a wish list? And from what I'm hearing, some staff has seen it, but I haven't seen it. So what are we expecting to spend? And in that, will there be significant spending on the learning loss problems and how to measure, how to increase the data to try to see what our learning loss has been? So can you go over some of that a little bit more? Because if we're planning to include this 1.5 million or in our calculations and in our brains, it'd be nice to know some of the big chunks that we want to spend it on.
Yeah, well, we're in the like I said, we're in the process of putting that list together. We have a list. We haven't shared that list, so I'm not sure who would have seen it within the district, other than just us administratively.
We've asked for input on. the
Right,
list.
we've asked for input, but that's not. Yeah, I mean, certainly when we finalize that, the board, of course, will get that information
May
and
11th,
we'll
that's
see
what,
that.
We'll be talking about that on May 11th, because that's where that
Right,
application is due.
it's due on the
May
14th, so,
14th.
right.
Mhm,
So
but
we'll have,
It's not prudent to see a list of what we want to spend $1.5 million on first.
Well, we said
before-
May 11th, before we put it in application on the 14th,
Mhm.
and we're compiling that list now, so we have a rough list, but we don't know exactly what we're doing yet. That's what we're working through administratively, and we'll have that for you. on
the list we
11th.
have equates to far more than 1.5 million, so.
Can
So
you
we
tell
need,
us
just
what
like
some
with
of
the
them-
regular budget, with the wish list we
Sure.
get every year is far more, and then we have to whittle it down to create the priorities. So that's the process that we're going through right now.
Can you tell us?
That the staff would see it before us, right? The staff needs to review the list and needs to filter up through the process to come to a list of recommendations for us.
Yeah.
Much in the same way that the budget is developed.
Right, the
But that
administrative group. yeah.
1.5 or what it becomes is not going to impact this, what we're talking about tonight.
Correct. Because remember, we have 2 years too to utilize those funds. So not all of that is necessarily going to be utilized in this in this upcoming year.
Right.
So that's part of what we are assessing.
We're really hoping to get notification on the uses and the amount of that next piece. We're trying to put this puzzle together, and it's difficult when you don't have all the pieces, right?
Mhm.
So, and it's kind of split up. So, but timing is what the timing is. But hopefully before that May 11th, if we get more notification, we can have a more concrete or concept plan of other things that we want to accomplish with some of these
But it
monies.
is an initiative for the district, no matter what, that, as Alex was talking about learning loss, that learning loss is our main focus. It's regardless of not getting the grant, money in this budget is going to go to learning loss.
Yeah, and
a lot of
part
those
of
funds
part
go.
of what we do is through our local assessments, Dibbles and other Linkit assessments that we use. That is part of how we assess where kids are. We kind of shared some of that, looking at where they are, where were they last year. As we put out there, the state testing for this year is not happening in the spring now. We know that, except for Access and the DLM, which is the dynamic learning maps, which is really just for a very small percentage of special education students. The state in the start of next year is looking to have us actually do state testing in the fall now. And so there's a window of probably late September through mid-October. That's still being finalized, where we will be doing some initial testing. It's very likely that we'll be doing 2 rounds next year, one in the fall and one in the spring. We haven't been given that full guidance yet. But right now, how we're assessing those things is through our local assessments, Dibbles, the Linkit assessments, and that's enabling us to know who we are, how we're expanding our summer programs, getting more kids into our summer programs, which is a big part of how we look to address those kids who are most struggling to we always have summer programs, but we want to get more kids into those programs and expand those summer programs so that kids are hopefully as close to where they would need to be for the start of next school year.
But in your recommendation of going from 2.0 to 1.7, part of that is, because we know we're going to get $1.5 million soon. And then in a couple of years, we're also going to get 4 million. So those are all good things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just trying hard to understand, how can we plan for $1.5 million, which we know we're going to get, but we just haven't decided yet, if we don't have any big examples, I guess, or a few more concrete ideas. In 2 weeks, you're going to tell us about what you want to use that $1.5 million for. Like, do you have any samples of?
So are you thinking that you don't have enough information to vote on a budget that's lowered because you don't know if learning loss is going to be covered?
Partially. I'd like to know what some of the $1.5 million that we're hoping, knowing we're going to get, how
The
we're going to
$1.5
spend it.
million that you're speaking of from the second round, we're only assuming spending $200,000 of it to result in the 2.0 going to 1.7. That only assumes $200,000 that we're confident can be spent for that. That leaves a balance of $1.3 million plus the additional 4.1 that we expect.
Yep.
The plan that Ken and Dr. Svankowitz and the rest of the administration are trying to put forward, we're hoping that we get guidance from the feds on how we can use the 4.1 so that they're not presenting a plan on 1.3 and then later 4.1, but they can come to us on a plan for 1 + 3 + 4.1. And recognizing too, that those are all one shots, right? They're 2-year one shots, but they're one shots. They're not funding that is perpetual throughout the years. We don't get that funding. It's a one-shot infusion of money that traditionally you wouldn't want to use for ongoing expenses that then become the burden of the taxpayer after the expiration of those funds in 2 years.
Sure.
So it's not as easy as just, I have, $4.5 million or 4.1 plus 1.3, so even more, $5.4 million to go buy something with. You want to make sure that you're going to use that in a way that is prudent and that doesn't leave the taxpayers with the choice of either cutting programming or coming up with filling in that really significant gap of money that this will lead us with. So yes, staff is coming up with proposals. The district will bring them to us as soon as they are ready for us to review. We wish we had more time, but the time constraints that are being put on us are not by virtue of work not being done to prepare for it. It's by virtue of the fact that the feds haven't given guidance as to how the money can be spent. If Ken and Jim could give us a list of things tonight that they knew were able to be used for those funds, we would have it. Although actually literally not in this meeting because it's not prudent to this conversation of the budget we're voting on tonight. If we knew what we could spend that money on over the course of the next years, they would love to bring that to us now. We don't have the guidance from the feds as to how we could spend that money.
But if they're
For the full one.
thinking
For
of
the
ideas,
4.1.
you have some wish lists. So I'm just asking for what some of these wish list ideas are. I know there's no concrete.
Well, like, for
These
example.
are the 17
so-
things
So
we're asking for.
for example, one of the
Thank you.
things that we are thinking about, over the last year, there's been a lot of discussion about some of the HVAC systems at the intermediate school, right? So that's something we are thinking about, to do some upgrades there. We know that we can utilize some of the 1.5 for that, but we don't know if we can utilize any of the 4.1. We don't even know that we're getting 4.1. So if we were to know, one, we're getting 4.1, and two, that was an allowable expense, then that might be something that we could utilize from that funding, and then that frees up other funding of the 1.5. If not, then we think that a good part of that 1.5 could go in that direction. But you asked for an example, that's an example. That doesn't mean that that's, that
Correct.
those are
Sure.
some of the things, to give you an idea,
Mhm.
that it's dependent upon, and some of the things we're talking about.
And do you have at least an academic example that you can give? That's a facilities example?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think we're looking at a lot of professional development. We're looking at a lot of, really expanding even more on our interventionist positions now into the middle school and the high school, where we have them primarily at the elementary school. So those are just some broad ideas of what we're looking at. And until we know the full picture, it's hard to give you that definitive. But on the 11th, we'll give you certainly what the 1.5 is going to be, because we have to put in, we have to put that in. But those are some examples of things we're looking at.
Mr. Weinstein?
Oh, yeah, I also want to make sure that you have enough time to also talk to your team and have everybody kind of give you their opinion. And because I'm sure when this thing comes up and you figure it out and you're asked and you're actually given the guidance, you still need some time to kind of give us your priority list, right? So I think that, I don't want to get cemented actually in anything that, I might feel is something you should do without hearing the context of what you think is the right balance. Because I think as an administration, we want to give you the ability to first tell us what your priorities are and the context of that before we start weighing in. So I want you to do when you feel comfortable and you have it and you can do that. So that's just my opinion. on that.
Yeah, I mean, just once again, we're going to lose another 500,000 in state aid next year. The idea of holding on to some of this money to see how it plays out through next year to offset some of those losses. We don't know what, not that we could use this for health benefits, but we don't know what health benefit increases would be next year yet. So if we have to take a little from here to go here, Ken and Shannon do amazing work over there to get to balance it all out. So there's still a lot of, I appreciate that, we want as much definitive answers as we can possibly give, but there's still a lot of balls up in the air to know exactly some of these things. So I think by May 11th, we'll certainly have a much more concrete idea of the 1.5. And hopefully by then we'll know what the third allocation will be.
Ms. Beal and Ms. Tallarico, I just want to give you the opportunity if you had any questions before we move on to the questions from the public.
I do not.
I do.
Ms. Tallarico?
So first, I want to thank you for the time, effort, and detail you put into the budget and the presentation tonight. And Mr. Jodron, thank you for explaining the breakdown of the formula. It was very helpful to me to understand. But since the formula is based on student enrollment, my questions are, what in decrease of student census over, say, the past 5 years? And are we seeing any trends of why this is happening?
You broke up a little bit, but I think you were asking about the enrollment decline and what what we've seen. We have had a, yeah, all right, we've had a demographer in the last, really 2 out of the last 3 years to really try to study to get a handle. And of course, it's an educated guess, enrollment projections. But we are looking at it, the enrollment the decline that we've experienced, it flattening out, and then within 5 years, starting to increase is what the demographic study said at the elementary level. So for now, it should be, we're still, the lower grade levels are just getting through the end of the high school now. So we're having some final declines at the high school and really some of the, a little bit at the intermediate school. So the next couple of years, they will be moving out, and then it'll be leveled off because grades, 1 through 12 will now have each seen a decline and are at the lower levels that we've experienced really over the last 12 years.
It will be interesting, just anecdotally, to see what this year's really, I think, expansion of the real estate market in Ocean Township will mean for us over the next so many years moving forward. A lot of people, I think, who would not necessarily be thinking of moving have taken advantage of very strong real estate market and have put their houses up for sale. And whether they're moving out of the township or staying with a different part of the township or whatever they're doing, it will be interesting to see what the long-term effect of that will be. I don't know that has certainly not been taken into consideration by the demographer, because that's a product, I think, of the pandemic and just what's going on around us right now.
And of course, you're certainly right. The decrease in enrollment has led to the state aid decrease. So
And that's been a trend for what, close to 20 years now that we've been losing enrollment. 15 years?
Yeah.
About 15 years.
Yeah, 15,
Yeah.
or just under that, I think, yeah. Did that answer your question, Grace-Ann?
Yes, thank you. And I think Dr. Stefakos's point is, very valid. So thank you.
All right, any other members of the board with questions? If not, we'll move on to the public.
I have additional questions.
Go ahead, Ms. East.
In, is it slide 35, you're saying, if I'm reading it correctly, that this current budget is proposing adding to current summer programs. So like, what's the percentage of increase? Or, are we talking from 120 kids to 140 kids now? Or are we, like many advocates are saying, we really need to have a push for summer because of all that's been lost this year? Are we making major summer gains or just a little?
Well, I don't have an exact percentage for you at this point. We're still assessing exactly how many kids. I know we're talking about longer period of time, more weeks. Typically, our summer programs last about 3 weeks, and this is exclusive of our extended school year program, which is for special education. So normally we do like 3-week programs. Are looking to extend that to 4 or 5 weeks, and then also involve more students.
More teachers, I believe.
Well, more teachers, obviously, to go along with the students, right? So, but we can, as we, over the next so many weeks, we'll have a much better idea of exactly what that means. But more weeks and more students. So that's the goal. But,
So when do
probably by next month, we can, we'll have a good idea. Because also too, we invite kids. That doesn't mean they're going to come. I mean, that is one thing we are concerned about, is that, in a year like this has been, and we do intend to have in-person summer programs, but in a year like this has been, I do have concern, we all have concern that some kids are going to be like, I need this summer not to be in school, So we're trying to, we have to make these programs as inviting and as engaging
You
as
should remind
possible,
people.
which we tend to do, but
You should remind people that this is an extra long summer too, because that might be
Yes.
something that parents.
yes, we worked hard at that, by the way. We worked hard to make that an extra long
No,
summer.
I know, but I'm saying
Yeah.
that might be one of your pushes.
Yeah, I mean, and we certainly, we do tend to get, kids, but you know, sometimes it's easier to get kids for a 3-week program than if you tell them it's a 5-week program or a 6-week program.
Mhm.
And then, because we also want kids to be in it for the program, not, well, I can do it for 2 weeks and then I'm going to be away for 2 weeks and then I'm coming back for a week. You know what I mean? So that makes it difficult from a continuity standpoint. So, you know, we want to make sure we're providing enough programming, but at the same time, we want to be careful not to kind of have the opposite effect of what we're trying to do. Another thing that we're looking to do is add an ELL component, a very specific ELL component to the summer program. So these are all, right now, ELL students have come and have integrated in, which we think is a good thing, but we could expand that by providing some specific, what would be more like sheltered instruction along with the integrated instruction to help a lot of our ELL and bilingual students. So that's another component that we are hoping to add to this year's.
And we have no sort of ballpark about, we're increasing it by 50% by now. I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
people
I
already
don't
plan their
have those
summers
numbers
by
with
now,
me.
so it would be,
I could certainly get them for you for next meeting. I can know how many, you know, I just don't remember exactly right now how many kids were in last year's
I mean,
program.
they put forward specific proposals.
Yeah, we would, I just
I'd
don't,
have
I
to
don't
look
have
it
it
up.
here.
who's
'cause
they,
it's
who put
The
forth?
The principals.
Principals. Just as a reminder to the board, there's nothing different in this budget other than the reduction in the tax levy because of the use of federal funds. That is different from what we've been discussing for the entire
Sure,
year.
I might have new questions though.
So
I mean,
you can have new questions,
yeah,
but I'm just making sure
that's
that the
fair.
public understands. None of this that's being presented tonight is materially different than anything you've been hearing us talk about. And the board has had an opportunity to review and discuss and actually voted on in our tentative budget back in March. The only change is the tax levy, moving from 2.0 to 1.7% through use of federal funds. But all of the provisions that are baked into the budget that result of that number are unchanged from what was voted on back in March and what the board has been discussing at length for months.
The other thing we talked about, just as another example, for the summer, and this was something that was a very big topic of our wellness committee meeting last week, was ensuring that we had enough mental health supports available for kids throughout the summer. Often we've relied, because, you know, I mean, obviously our mental health support staff are typically 10 months. We do have counselors who do work in the summer. Most of that is for scheduling purposes, things like that. And we've typically relied on human services to handle mental health supports over the summer. Certainly they will still be available to our kids, but having some of this money does afford us the opportunity to have more of our staff available for students, you know, who are struggling perhaps with, you know, with mental health concerns.
I do have just one more question, but I think just to clarify why I'm bringing up the summer program was because back in March when we voted on this, I don't think I did. And I think since March, we have seen an increased glaring need for summer programming and components and an increase in mental health. So that's why I feel like a discussion is a little bit more warranted, being that we have 56 participants. You know, maybe parents don't even know that there was a big summer influx coming.
But I think you also have to remember that the big summer influx that is coming,
Mhm.
we're not 100% sure what it is. So putting it out there is good that we're thinking about it, but putting it, or we're talking about it and trying to do it, but putting it out there is that it's happening is not necessarily it's a little premature for the discussion because we don't know exactly what of the things Dr. Stefankowitz did because the DIBELS and the LinkIt testing is still being accomplished so that they know exactly how many kids and who can come and all of that. So I think that, yes, it's a good conversation, but I
Yeah,
think that
it's
when we have
typically
more
May.
information-
It's typically
Right, we
May
always
when
find
we
it's a May, yeah,
really have a
that's when the
firm
letters go
idea
out
of
and
where
stuff
kids
like that
are.
is once it's done, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
the
it
budget's
sounds
approved
like
and
the
then-
whole summer program is changing as opposed to the
It's not
kids who
change-
might.
There's additions.
No, I think
That's
it's
what I
just
mean, like,
adding, it's
people
adding
are
to what we're
changing.
currently doing.
No, you're saying that people who might not have done the summer program now probably will get to. So
Yeah,
if I
some,
never
yeah.
thought my kid was going to participate in the summer because they were never in that like basic skills or whatever, May is going to be too late for me to know that, oh, we're expanding by 30% our summer program or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Actually, I don't think it's too premature to tell people about summer, but okay, moving along. My second question is my last question is just going to be 3% down in special ed out of district from last year to this year. I forgot which slide that was on, and I don't remember bringing this up previously. So are we just, where did we get that number from? Just so I can understand that. Are there less special ed students? are kids aging out? Are we lowering the percentage of out-of-district placements? Like, because normally special ed goes up, so I'm just curious as to why the
Yeah,
out-of-district is actually going down.
I think you're right. It's aging out, more aging out than coming in. So we have a net decrease in the number of students,
Okay, and that should be
which
the 3%.
doesn't normally happen. You're
Doesn't
right.
normally happen. Okay,
Right.
that's why it kind of stuck out. Okay, thank you. I think that's all I had.
At this time, we'll entertain any questions from the public related to the budget presentation. As a reminder to anyone who may be new, if you have a question or would like to make a comment, please send a message to the help desk, and Ms. Conway will call on you to ask your question. Ms. Conway, is there anyone in the queue?
President Fuller, no, there are no commenters in the queue.
All right, thank you very much. So then moving along, Ms. Tortorella, will you read the resolution in financial management? It's on the screen as well.
Yeah, I like to read it on my in Board Docs, so. Okay. Resolution adopting the budget appropriations for the 2021-2022 school year. Whereas the tentative school district budget for the 2021-2022 school year was adopted by the Board of Education, approved by the Executive County Superintendent, and the tentative budget was advertised in the newspaper of record as well as posted on the school district website. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Township of Ocean adopt the following school budget appropriations for the 2021-2022 school district budget statement of a total base budget of $88,035,160. And 5.2 is the resolution approving the sources of anticipated budget revenue for the 21-22 school year. A, general funds. Be it resolved that there be appropriated from general fund surplus $3,729,467, and this sum be applied to the general funds in an effort to reduce taxes in the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that there be raised from local taxes for general funds $67,852,899 for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the board anticipates $150,000 in tuition and transportation revenue, which is to be applied to the general fund for the 21-22 school year. Be it further resolved that the board anticipates $390,000 of miscellaneous revenue and rental income, which is to be applied to the general funds for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the board anticipates $6,080,843 of state aid and $950,000 of extraordinary special education aid, which is to be applied to the general funds for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the board anticipates $92,121 of Medicaid reimbursement, which is to be applied to the general fund for the 21-22 school year. B, capital reserve and maintenance reserve accounts. Be it resolved that the board anticipates $500 for capital reserve and $300 for maintenance reserve for the 21-22 school year. C, special revenue fund. Be it resolved that the board anticipates $2,814,007 of restricted federal aid, which is to be applied to the special revenue fund for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the board anticipates $2,673,894 of restricted state aid, which is to be applied to the special revenue fund for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the board anticipates $16,100 of restricted state aid, which is to be applied to the student activities fund for the 21-22 school year. And D, debt service fund. Be it resolved that there be raised from local taxes for the debt service fund $2,675,889 for the 21-22 school year. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education anticipates $609,140 of district service of debt service aid type 2, which is to be applied to the debt service fund for the 21-22 school year. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. General?
Okay, so this is 5.1 and 5.2.
Yes.
Mrs. Beal,
I will recuse myself from 5.1 and 5.2 for professional reasons.
okay, Mrs. Gilman,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mrs. Paralamas,
Yes.
Mrs. Telerico,
Yes.
Mrs. Tortorella,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
and Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Okay, the motion's carried.
Thank you, Ms. Tortorella, and thank you to everyone on the board for all of your work on the budget. Moving on, old business. Is there any old business from the board?
Can I just have one quick thing, just a comment I want to make about the Wednesdays. So Jim knows how I feel about this. I brought it up on the reopening task force and I just need to say it here. Our elementary school students, there's less than 10% that are all remote, as we reported last time. So there's 6 Wednesdays left, I believe. 3 hours of Wednesday, that's 18 hours. It's 3 full days in school that over 90% of elementary school kids are missing for 10% that are remote. And I just wanted to state that I think that was a wrong decision and the kids should be in school full days on Wednesday. I know it's a done issue. Again, I'm just putting it on the record with that comment, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Tortorella. Any other members of the board with old business? Any new business from the?
There's like a millisecond to respond. I just would like to concur with Natalie. I have a remote child, 2 remote children, and I would actually prefer a full day on Wednesday as well. And I think a lot of remote parents would.
Any other old business from the board? Any new business from the board? Ms. Gilman.
Dr. Stefanowitz, can you give us any information about graduation and prom after the governor's announcement? Or you're still working on it?
Well, yes, yes and yes. Yes, I can give you some information. Yes, we are still working on it. So obviously, the governor made an announcement yesterday, and of course, the governor makes an announcement, and then and everybody goes, yay, and then, the details come out, and it is still yay, but tempered yay, right? Let me speak to graduation first, because I think that's a little easier. Outdoor celebrations up to 500 people, which is good. What's even better is in the Department of Education guidelines, that 500 does not include the graduates or staff. So we are hopeful. Now we have 267 graduates. Do that math, and you'll say if everybody brings 2 people, that's slightly over 500. So the governor did say that this is the first step, and hopefully we'll continue to open up even more. So, but we are very hopeful that we will be able to have one ceremony per school on the last day, on the 16th. That is the goal. That is what we want to do, but there's still that little bit of uncertainty there, literally 34 people of uncertainty that we have, right? So that's what graduation is. Prom is also, hopeful news. Just some details that have to be worked out. So the governor spoke of 250 max for an indoor celebration like a prom. Once again, we have 267 seniors. We were planning on an outdoor, because also our juniors are also involved, obviously, too, but I think we're focused perhaps more on the seniors than the juniors, but I'm sure the junior parents are out there too, and I know Lisa was on. I saw her. There she is. Hi, Lisa. Working very hard, I know, to try to get that done. But So we're very hopeful. Now, once again, 500 for outdoor, so maybe proms fall within that, and that would be good. But if we're talking about 500, then would you be allowed to bring a guest? Once again, if everybody goes and everybody brings a guest, that's more than 500, right? Now, not everybody would bring a guest, so there's all those things. We don't know if the workers within the facility count toward that 500. There's still some unanswered questions, but I think what the governor said yesterday, and the executive order is still yet to come. And that's important. Like, he made an announcement, but they haven't released, can't say they haven't written, they haven't released the official executive order that will define all this. So once that happens, we think that, we'll have hopefully more solid information. But I think all this leaves us very hopeful. The one thing about the prom that they did say, however, was that there was a notation about masks would need to be worn. This was for indoor, because there was no mention of outdoor prom. That's part of the other thing we're looking at. But it was, masks would have to be worn, and dancing would have to maintain socially distant guidelines. So there can be dancing. The old days when the principal would walk between the students, now they would walk through with a yardstick on both sides.
How big of a dance floor do you need?
Yeah, well, you remember those things that had the meter stick coming out of both sides? Like, so we would walk around with that. But
Everyone else hearing the Footloose song? in their head?
Yeah.
it could be the Footloose song. Yes, cut loose. So, these are still some of the unanswered questions that hopefully we will get more guidance on in the very near future. But we are very hopeful.
Yeah.
We're very hopeful, yes.
Kind of good news.
And
Yes.
would they be able to stay in their original venues, or there's going to have to be changes made to that?
Well, you mean for prom? Well, I don't think that they would, when you say the original venues, what do you
Like,
mean?
I don't know where the senior prom is.
They moved to Jump.
I think they're looking at an outdoor
Okay,
place closer to home.
gotcha.
It's my understanding. And I think that the juniors, I think we're looking at on campus outside somewhere, maybe the football field or,
Okay,
somewhere.
very nice. Okay,
Because they usually have it at the middle school
right, inside. the,
cafeteria.
yeah.
So it would be outside, I think, at the high school.
That would be
That's what they're
great.
thinking about.
Nice.
I think.
Thank you.
Hopefully I got that
That's
right, Lisa.
helpful.
Thank you.
Any other new business from the board?
I have a couple of comments. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't always pay attention to high school sports. I should. I try to follow all the teams. But a parent mentioned that our bowling team did very well a while back, and they never heard it on the Board of Ed meeting, and maybe we missed it. When we ever have like a conference win or a district win, do we always say it, or can we make sure that we do always say it, like within 2 weeks of that happening?
We
'Cause I think-
typically, we have an athletic awards program at the end of every school
Mhm.
year. So we typically just, unless one of the students talks about it in their report, we typically would only focus on, like, if we have state championship school teams, and we typically brought those teams in we have done, if we've had coaches of the year, we've brought them in.
Mhm.
Because we will, we win. So we typically at board meetings, we haven't done it because we have an athletic night.
Yeah.
So. that
Well, I
kinda
think
answers that question.
I hope I don't get it wrong, but I think they both won their central divisions, so I think
Yeah, I think they did.
that's
And we've had a
pretty
number of
impressive.
teams that have, that have done that.
I
throughout the
can't
course.
bowl, so I found that out this week, and I said, I never knew about that.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to mention a congratulations to Max Larari and Mason Ansell. They are state champions of the 12 and under hockey team out of Jersey Shore Arena. We don't have state champions too often, so I thought that was a pretty awesome accomplishment that should just be mentioned at a Board of Ed meeting, since they're 2 6th grade students at the middle school. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
In the line of sports, I hope everybody saw that we have our first female golf athlete
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
And that she placed.
We're doing a
10th.
story on that, as a matter
Yeah,
of
there
fact.
is, it went out today.
That's
Um,
awesome.
We have what?
Yeah, can
Our
you-
first female golfer, and it's Reese Corcoran, and she's somebody who I dearly love, so I'm very happy to see her
Mhm.
doing really
She's a
well.
freshman, right?
She is a freshman.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's great.
And she placed 10th in her first her first tournament of Monmouth and Ocean County, I believe, which is pretty incredible for her first tournament ever, I believe, playing. You know,
That's
she's
great.
always played with her dad, her mom.
And my final question is Wednesday food, are we keeping Wednesdays at the locations from 12 to 3? And will we be sending out reminders for those parents that are like, wait, what's going on? Is it full day? Is it half day? Because I think everyone's just so confused with what's happening Wednesdays.
Were you talking about sending out some reminders about food or sending out reminders about everything?
Reminders, well, obviously everything, but about
Yeah.
food.
Yes, times
For
will,
pickup?
times will need to alter because we are now
They will.
transporting kids to and from. So
Mm-hmm.
the window will be, I mean, and Ken, you'll know more, but I think the window will be within, it'll probably be 1 to 2:30.
Yes.
1 to 2:30. So it'll be within the original window, but it'll be a shortened window within it.
Will it be a different,
Less demand too.
Right.
yeah,
Our demand has been going, and we will
It's
still
been
be
going
doing
up.
grab and go meals on Wednesdays for our secondary students. The elementary students eat in school on even on early dismissal days. So that will happen, and the secondary kids, 5 through 12, will have grab and go lunches when they leave school on Wednesdays. And but so it's really about the remote kids. That's really who we're talking about. And that has been the demand each week has been getting less and less and less. So we're going to lower the time or shorten the time frame, but the offsite locations will stay. We don't necessarily know that we'll need the school locations because kids will be in school, but there will be some meals at each school location in case people show up and are looking for those. meals.
Maintaining the offsite locations were difficult because it's right at the time when elementary
from school.
busing is going on. So we worked harder, or I should say, Sodexo and Maria Moscow over transportation worked hard on figuring out a way to do it. So, because that's what we wanted to maintain.
And that actually was part of the reason why we talked about the early dismissal was because logistically for food, we typically have our security staff there as well. And with kids in session, we didn't want to pull security staff out of schools. So if we do it at that time, the kids will be home and the security staff can go and help facilitate the food distribution without leaving the schools without some security. So
Will it be
that was
different-
another consideration as to part of, why we did that.
Will it be different doors though? Because like the elementaries are in school till what, 1:05, and you're saying
Right.
1 o'clock pickup for food? So aren't the buses going to be in the driveways? So where do parents go to pick up the food?
Well, I think we're
Same
focused.
places.
I think we're focusing more on the offsite locations.
Right.
Once again, the schools, the kids will be in school.
Not
right?
mine,
I'm sorry.
not mine or other remote kids. So where do?
Right, so they'll have till 2:30. There will be meals at the schools.
Okay.
But as I said, we'll leave some meals at each school, but we're not going to have probably the same quantity of meals that we've had at those schools because just very few people have come to the school locations. But the majority of people go to the offsite location.
And you're not going to want parents showing up at 1 o'clock at
Yeah.
Dow or Wayside when there's
we can
buses in the
certainly,
driveway.
well, so, yes, but we can certainly, as we put out information, if you're stopping at a school to, if you could get there a little bit beyond 1
Okay.
o'clock, 1:30 and beyond would be more ideal. But what would you say, Ken? 90% of the people are at the offsite locations, if not?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And we wanted to also make sure that the kids were out of school. So as the kids were not having to leave their remote learning to go get the food. So we wanted to maintain that time after school.
Yes, it was a tight one.
All right, so but definitive guidance will go out on that to the entire community so that everyone can hear and know exactly where they should go and when they should be there. Thank you.
Mhm.
Moving on to public comment. At this time, we will accept public comment on any item. Again, please send a message to the help desk and Ms. Conway will assist you. Ms. Conway, is there anyone in the queue?
Yes, President Fuller, there's one person in the queue, and that is Sandy Abdelaziz.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. Sandy Abdelaziz, 30 Dune Road in Wayside. I had to talk. I mean, come on, really? Dr. Stefanik, could you just quickly talk about the decision for stopping the temperature checks. I understand nobody was caught, but a couple parents brought to my attention, which I kind of agree with. If a parent kind of knows, I mean, obviously there's going to be parents that give them Tylenol in the morning to bring the temperature down. But I mean, if a child knows that they're going to get temperature checked and they feel like they have a fever, obviously they're going to stay home. But now if they know they're not getting temperature checked, would they come in? Like somebody brought that to my attention. I thought that was pretty interesting to think of it in that term.
Well, right, nothing is ever 100%, Sandy, but you know, when you've taken literally, and it is a literal number of 500,000 temperatures over the course of the school year, and not one student has presented with a fever, not one, and no adult has presented with a fever with 500,000 temperature checks, and many hospitals now have announced this was part of our discussion at our task force meeting. So we have a few people who work at hospitals that say they're no longer doing temperature checks. It just seemed our principals really believed that the resources that they use in the morning to do this, which is not proving to find anyone ill, could be better served, serving the students who are coming into school. And that's really the main, I think, and it's what I put in my letter yesterday that went out. I mean, that's really what it is. When you're doing something and it's not proving to, be effective in that way, whether it's because no one has a fever or, it's just not catching it. The best way is, and I think it's what's happening the vast majority of time, is that when a student's ill, parents keep them home. I know we like to talk about give them the Tylenol. I don't know that a lot of that's happening. I think we have some kids who do present sick during the day. I believe that, in most cases, they were feeling fine in the morning. In some cases, there are probably some kids who come in who probably shouldn't have. But that's that. We've been dealing with that all year, whether we've been taking temperatures or not. So we don't think that we're going to lose anything by not doing it. I don't think it's going to jeopardize anyone by not doing it. So that's the idea.
Well, I'm assuming, did you talk to the Monmouth County Regional Health Commission about that? Because I know it's in the guidelines to actually do a temperature check.
It's actually not. What's in the guidelines? No, it's not. What's in the guidelines is that you need to have some plan for assessing student health prior to the start of the school day. And the plan, really, the primary plan has always been that parents do that for their children before they leave the house in the morning. That is the plan. That remains to be the plan. As I said in my letter, in November, the CDC actually came off of the idea of doing daily temperature checks. And we discussed that in our task force meeting at that time. And it was the feeling at that time that even though the CDC was saying you don't have to do that, that we should do it and that we should maintain that and do it. I think now we have enough knowledge and enough data for 8 months of school year and 500,000 tests of no fever that we can go along with that recommendation at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Conway, is there anyone else in the queue?
Yes, President Fuller, there's one more person in the queue, and that is Jody Madigan.
Thank you. Ms. Madigan, you can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry if this was discussed at last week's Board of Ed meeting. It was probably the one that I missed, but I was just hoping that Dr. S could explain how lunches are now going to work when we go back to full days at the intermediate school and high school.
Sure.
Absolutely. They will work exactly as they did from September through February. We run our regular schedule. Now, what helped us, and the only reason we came away from lunch, the schedule we were running from September through February, was because when we ended the cohort model on March 1st, more kids were coming back. And it was still winter months. There was a lot of winter sports were still going on. So we were using other gyms and other areas within the school that now that those sports have ended, we can utilize. So we can use more room in some of our gymnasiums, more room outside. So we can facilitate. And now we know how many kids are back too. Like, we were a little uncertain when we ended the cohort model exactly how many students would come back. So now that we know that we can facilitate what we did from September through February in our buildings because winter sports are no longer happening. We can utilize those areas. And I also just want to remind everyone, we didn't abandon lunches because it was an unsafe practice. We really had, I don't believe we had any person come up with COVID symptoms or COVID because of lunch. So we believe that we absolutely can facilitate lunch successfully. And it was just a question of room. And now with gymnastics ending at the high school and wrestling ending, we have more spaces to utilize. And outside, the weather is just more conducive to kids going outside, and we've ordered more tables, so we have the facilities to do it now.
Okay, that sounds great. I was just, picturing, the entire grade level again in the cafeteria. So,
No.
okay, that puts my mind at ease. Thank you so much.
I'm picturing that too, but that might be September.
Aspirational. Thank you, Ms. Madigan. Ms. Conaway, is there anyone else in the queue?
No, President Fuller, there is no more commenters in the queue.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? Second. See you all in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining us tonight.